Hey, it's Roy Newgate, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the supernova. Specifically, I wanted to discuss what their fate may be as the story moves forward. And although we should have a pretty good idea on what lies ahead for a few of them, there's a lot of uncertainty for the majority, so I wanted to get into what possible roles they might have going forward, and if they have any roles at all. But before we get into all of that, if this is your first time here, or if you just typically enjoy discussion videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay posted on all of my videos. With that aside, let's get right into it. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave Zoro and Luffy out and focus on the rest of them since everything is pretty much written out for those two since they've been with us since the beginning of the story. For the rest of them though, I think it's important to mention that they weren't even a concept in Oda's mind until a little over halfway through the story, and that they were sort of a last second addition in the days leading up to the serialization of the Sabaody arc. And he even said himself he thought a number of them would have dropped out by now because of how tough the new world is. But we can see a lot of them are still relevant to varying degrees, and that just shows that the story is constantly evolving and incorporating new ideas that were not in Oda's original vision. So it may be the case that a certain supernova gains more importance this year than they had the last year, and that will eventually reflect in the manga. One such example of a character's importance rising to even Oda's surprise is Law, who has been pretty pivotal to the plot since the Punk Hazard arc, and has been fighting alongside the crew pretty much every step of the way as he plays a crucial strategic role. We were reminded again how vital he is in the moment right before the raid, where he presented his plan to attack to the Scabbards, who didn't have a sufficient enough scheme of their own. But let's put aside his value as an ally for a minute because he has goals of his own too. And the one that pops out the most is his pursuit of the meaning of D. And he's figured to discover the hidden truth, he needs to defeat the 4 emperors and procure the 4 role poneglyphs, which of course aligns exactly with the goals of the Straw Hats. And that tells us that these two parties will be allied for the remainder of the 4 Emperor saga. So even after Wano, Law will be certain to fight alongside the crew as their mutual interests converge on the road to Raftel. You know, initially when Law presented his plan to defeat Kaido, he didn't mention any of the other emperors, and his own plan was just to cover for his revenge plot against Doflamingo. So he was shocked to hear that Luffy wanted to take down all 4. Though I figure once he had determined his own purpose is when he decided to involve himself with the Straw Hats for the longer term. And we see that when he confided in Robin about his identity as a D. But there's also the fact that he's one of those who has expressed an interest in the One Piece and by extension becoming the Pirate King. But you have to wonder, is he still as ambitious to take home gold as he was before the Alliance? Or rather before this particular arc? And with the way he acts when Kid teases him for acting as Luffy's subordinate, you would think he still takes enough pride in his place as a captain to not allow himself to just deviate to this role of a silver medalist. But speaking of Kid, his journey in the New World along with Killer has been one that has brought them a lot of punishment and trials that would force most people out of contention. Going back to the concept of the supernova, Oda always thought of Kid as being an important character from the very beginning, but the question is, what exactly would this entail and how far would it take him? One may think that he meant he'd be needed for the fight against the Emperors of the Sea, and this would be where he would maximize his usefulness and relevance. And to be honest, that's the idea I held on to for a while myself. I figured after Wano he would no longer have any value at all, and this was mostly because on the surface I looked at how outmatched his crew is in every possible metric by Luffy and the Straw Hats. In terms of power, it doesn't even appear to be close. They were already looking severely outmatched before this portion of the arc, but they've since added someone as revered as Jinbei, who both Law and Kid couldn't believe had decided to ally himself with the Straw Hats. And then you add the thousands of allies, the global connections, the fact that they have Robin, Luffy's ability to attract people to him, and it's very hard to see how you can make a comparison. But even with those odds, I'm sure Kid is not one bit deterred, and will keep pushing until his dying breath. How far that will get him is anyone's guess. But at this moment in time, I definitely do not think that his relevance dries out in Wano. Oda's words about his importance, along with the fact that he gave him Conqueror's Haki, tells me we should expect to see more of him after this arc, and perhaps this saga. Oda has brought back several antagonists and has given them roles for the future, so it shouldn't be any surprise that Oda will plan to do this for Kid as well, especially given his unwavering will, which we see in full display in Wano. For him to still keep pushing, despite already coming face to face with an Emperor's crew and losing a limb, being tortured, having his right-hand man get force-fed a smile fruit, it speaks volume on how far he's willing to go. You can call it irrational confidence, and that may very well be the case, but there's no concept of quitting in his mind, and his crew is fervently right behind him every step of the way. Then you have plot lines like him successfully taking something from Big Mom that still needs to be explored. He seemed pretty satisfied with that, so that will definitely come up again in the future, and we'll see how heavy of a cost that was to Big Mom, and how much of a gain this was for Kid. Now, with both Law and Kid, I can see a situation at the end of the story in which they again align with Luffy to take on the world government in the final war. And in this situation, perhaps Kid is a much more willing participant, depending on what transpires between now and then. And Luffy will need all the help he can get at this point. The world government has the most powerful force in the world, and we haven't even seen all of it. And they're constantly growing, and with their advancements in technology behind the greatest mind the world has ever seen, there is no limit to what they're capable of. And so, with an entity like this, there is no such thing as being overprepared. There's actually always a risk of being underprepared. And then when we go back to chapter 1000, where we have the narration by Odin, detailing what the five on the rooftop represent, it should be obvious that this group of powerful pirates that will lead the next generation will be around for the long haul. One supernova you can argue is perhaps maybe the third most important to the plot is Bonnie. In any case, she's definitely in the top 5. I don't think that's even debatable. There is so much mystery surrounding her devil fruit ability, and what the world government wants with her that the theory potential is immeasurable. We know that the world government wanted Law's devil fruit and was willing to pay 5 billion berries for it, which is a gargantuan price tag to put on anything in the series, but we don't know why exactly they wanted it. A possibility though is that they wanted to make use of the eternal youth surgery, and Bonnie's devil fruit is able to grant youth to an individual as well, although not eternal. Though I imagine the user of the devil fruit can effectively grant themselves eternal youth at no cost. So it's very likely that the whole concept of youth might be the driving force of the pursuit of the Opie Opie and Bonnie. Or maybe after failing to acquire the Opie Opie before Law ate it, they set their sights on Bonnie. The world government has failed to fully exploit her as she's managed to escape them twice, but we'll be sure to see what they need her for in the future. Beyond just what we see on the surface, of course, there may be other abilities that make her fruit special, just like Law. And it may even be just her as a person that may have some knowledge or role to play for them. After all, we don't even know how old she really is. She may easily be centuries old and has constantly changed her age and altered her appearance. Can you imagine if she's from the void century itself? I think that possibility is very strong. After all, Toki traveled through time from around that era using her fruit power as well. One thing that I'm especially curious about is what moved her so much about Ace's execution that she would set sail and target Blackbeard directly, knowing full well he had already acquired the 2 strongest devil fruits and had wreaked as much havoc as he did. She seemed very emotional at the time of the execution itself, but didn't speak on it or give a reason for her sudden display of sentiment. And there's a connection with Kuma that was a little more explicit, as she promised to make the world nobles pay for what they had done to him. So, given all this mystery and potential that comes with her character, I have no doubt in my mind that she will have one of the biggest roles to play for the Supernova moving forward, and pretty much out of any character, and that her relevance will hold until the very end of the series as we move closer and closer to a direct confrontation with those who sit at the top of the world government. Speaking of the government, next we have Drake, and Drake for a while many speculated may have still had ties to the Navy, despite him being introduced as a pirate who had long since defected from his post as a rear admiral. Of course, eventually it was revealed that he is a member of the secret marine organization SWORD, along with Kobe. Ironically, it was Drake's father who had acquired the Opi Opi no Mi and was prepared to deal it to the Navy. As the plan was foiled and the fruit was stolen, Drake escaped and left his father behind, eventually to be picked up by the Marines. Now, his father was a Navy man himself, but had also left them to become a pirate. In contrast with Drake, though, he had no ties with them at this point. He was a full-fledged pirate now, who had even started to abuse Drake, leading to the X-shaped scar on his chin. Before all of this happened though, Drake admired the Navy man his father had built himself up to be, and wanted to become a Marine himself one day. And even though his father became a sick and twisted man, he still held firm to his dream and worked his way up the ranks. It was implied by his father that he may have been the strongest on the crew, and so he likely had a lot of potential from the start when it comes to combat. I feel like his potential won't stop here though, and that he'll end up pushing forward yet again with the Marines, and ultimately become an admiral by the end of the story. Of course, it can't just be this generation of pirates making their way up to the top. And I feel like there's some reformation coming soon for the Marines as well, as a whole, and that Drake will have a part to play in this. We have people like Smoker, Fujitora, and Kobe who don't seem to be all that in line with the corrupt nature of the Navy and the world government, so I definitely see this group spurring a lot of change in the concluding arcs. For the remaining Supernova, which consists of Apu, Yoroj, Hawkins, and Beige, I'm not exactly sure what's left for them in the story. It could be the case where their roles will be limited and they won't have much of an impact. For someone like Apu, I can see him easily jumping ship if he makes it out of Wano, and aligning himself with someone like Blackbeard, or at least attempting to. Apu has made a reputation for himself as a backstabber, so that might come back to bite him in the end. A number of the Supernova hold a grudge against him, or just straight up detest him. I can see a case in which he eventually fights Kid because that matchup has been in the works for ages, and the animosity between the two intensified once Apu betrayed the alliance he formed with the Kid and Hawkins pirates. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say that he would die at the hands of Kid, knowing Oda, but that may be how he's taken out of the story. Hawkins is even harder to calculate because he became a member of the Beast Pirates simply because his cards told him he had no chance of survival if he attempted to escape. So if he makes it out of here alive, his next move is pretty hard to determine. His time in Wano though could also be seen as a humbling experience because he doesn't seem to have the type of will that some of the more prominent Supernova possess. I definitely don't see him staying in the race for the One Piece. Same with Yoroge, who happens to be the oldest of the Supernova, as far as we know anyway. And lastly, there's Capone Gang Beige. He's a man who's willing to cross anyone to get what he wants, and even went as far as to betray the Big Mom Pirates despite the dangers. But he has a soft spot for his family and will do anything for him. Given his wife's relationship with Nami and the Straw Hats, I can easily see them crossing paths and even aligning again in the future. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what his plans are in the meantime. Alright, now we've reached the end of the discussion, and those are pretty much all my thoughts on what I think lies ahead for the Supernova. I definitely want to hear what you guys think though. Do you think all of them will remain relevant and have a part to play? Do you think there will be more alliances on the way and in the final war? And which of them do you think will die at some point in the future? Because that's definitely on the table as well. Comment all your thoughts down below, but also don't forget to like the video and subscribe as well.